Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. Opposition blasts government for inaction in dealing with corruption. No date yet for resumption of face-to-face classes. And later in sports, Jamaica set to make historic appearance in skateboarding at the Pan Am Junior Championships in December. I'm Giovanni Dennis and here are the details. The opposition is fuming over what it deems as the inaction of the government in dealing with issues of corruption. Opposition spokesman on finance Julian Robinson raised concern at a PNP press conference on Monday. O'Shane Masters reports.
The opposition continues to question the role of a government amid multiple reports showing members of state-run boards acting in breach of government policies. The PNP spokesman on finance, Julian Robinson, pointed to the investment of $3 million in First Rock Capital Holdings by the Airports Authority of Jamaica as an example. Responding to questions by the opposition in Parliament in July, Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark revealed that the AAJ's board acted in breach, adding that approval is needed for investments in unlisted private companies, which First Rock was at the time of the initial investment. Mr. Robinson says the inaction of a government on the matter sends a clear message.
The board members who breach the government's guidelines, who breach their own investment policy, still remain board members of the Airports Authority of Jamaica. The Minister of Transport and Works, who is the portfolio minister, has said absolutely nothing on the matter. Now, I must ask myself, is the government protecting members of the board because of who they are? Or is the government afraid to act in relation to a board which by its own confirmation has acted against its own laws and regulations?
He also pointed to the recent report from the Auditor General, which showed that millions of dollars were paid out to people connected to members of the board of Nutrition Products Limited, NPL.
In almost all the cases, none of these contracts went to public tender. It's a Petrojam 2.0. The same things. First, you get rid of the professional staff. You bring in, based on cronyism, unqualified persons, generally in HR. After you bring in the unqualified persons, they then bring in their friends to loot and thief. Petrojam 2.0 is NPL.
He says there is no accountability within the government.
It is a shame and disgrace, and the government has done nothing. When you ask the Minister of Education, she say you have to ask the Minister of Transport. When the Minister of Finance say him can't answer, you have to ask the Minister of Transport. The whole of them sit down at the same cabinet and nobody can give an answer. The country must demand more.
O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
Meanwhile, the opposition has also reacted to a plan to replace close protection officers with private security personnel for some public officials. Sandy Williams reports.
Opposition spokesman on national security Peter Bunting has seemingly agreed with the position taken by National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang. However, he believes that some officials should continue to benefit from police personnel providing security protection. Mr. Bunting said while serving as National Security Minister, he made a similar proposal. He said his reasons were similar to those presented by Dr. Chang, which is to free up some of the officers for deployment to regular police duties. Mr. Bunting says he understands the position taken by the government, but he has issues with one aspect of the decision.
I believe that every judge should have close protection. That element I don't agree with. But the broader policy initiative that do we need police officers to stand up at the gate of King's House and Jamaica House and do the static duty at all the thing? Do we need regular police officers? Can we use district constables? Can we use a specially trained cohort for that? Would it be more efficient?
He has suggested how private security guards should be used.
Private security can be used as for the static guard duties at residences, etc. That's where I think the private security could be used.
But not for the traveling with the actual judges themselves?
No. I think you need a police officer for that, and it can be a specially trained cohort. I think they should be regulars, but they could go through a more specialized training rather than the broad training which they will not use in that assignment.
Mr. Bunting was speaking on Radio Jamaica's Beyond the Headlines on Monday. Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
To other news, opposition spokesperson on education, Dr. Angela Brown-Burke, is again calling for the resumption of face-to-face classes. Lamenting the continued negative impact of remote learning, Dr. Brown-Burke is advocating for the use of data to determine the way forward.
It is not just the Ministry of Health who needs to share data. It is also an honest conversation with principals so that they understand in the locale, in the community where the school is, where children are coming from to go to school, what is the level of transmission. Let's work something out so people understand that. So you understand when it is at this level of transmission, then we can't have children coming out. But if it goes down and this is what we identify to be that marker, that then they can come to school.
She also reiterated her stance on the Ministry of Education's policy, stating that a school must have 65% of its population vaccinated before face-to-face classes can resume. However, now that the country has run out of the Pfizer vaccines, many, including the opposition, has been asking, what now?
And because there is no vaccine, it is unimaginable that our leaders, our Ministry of Education, has left on the table the only solution of staying home until they say well.
In the meantime, the Ministry of Education says it cannot give a definite date for the resumption of face-to-face classes in the public school system. Acting Chief Education Officer Dr. Casson Troop says the ministry is awaiting the outcome of cabinet discussions. The Education Ministry had given a mid-October return to physical classes for high school students if the majority was fully vaccinated. And it's now time for a break here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. We'll have much more when we return. Welcome back. We're continuing the news. Cabinet officially resumed face-to-face meetings yesterday, this after 10 months of remote meetings due to COVID-19. In his opening address, Prime Minister Andrew Holness said vaccination played an important part in the return to in-person meeting. Sandy Williams reports.
Signs of what's to come. Cabinet members presenting their COVID-19 vaccination cards for inspection before entering the meeting room. Prime Minister Andrew Holness said the government has to lead the country towards normalcy.
It means that we will have to change the way in which we operate, the way in which we have been conducting ourselves. It doesn't mean that we dispense with the infection prevention and control measures. We have to take the options that are before us more seriously and with greater consistency.
Those options include proper mask wearing, maintaining physical distance, sanitizing, staying home if ill with respiratory or flu-like illnesses, and observing the protocols as it relates to no movement and curfews. But Mr. Holness said for people who choose not to take those options,
to get vaccinated. The country will be directed as to how we will transition to the new normal of living with the COVID-19 disease and the coronavirus. And a large part of living with the disease will be how we all decide to take the vaccines.
the parliamentary opposition has made it clear it is not in favor of vaccine mandates.
There is no indemnification offered by the government, or as I understand it, by the manufacturers of the vaccines, if somebody has an adverse reaction. How are you going to mandate somebody that they must take a vaccine if you're not prepared to stand behind them with indemnification if they get sick or otherwise suffer an adverse reaction? I don't see that as possible.
But Mr. Holness believes it is unfair for people to want their right not to take the vaccine and move about freely and do as they wish to be respected, while those who are vaccinated endure hardships. However, he said the requirement would still be in place for testing, in particular in critical missions and situations where gathering or in-person meetings cannot be avoided. Meanwhile, the government is to announce new vaccination policies after it completes its public education campaign. Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
The climate crisis is the single biggest health threat facing humanity. That, according to the World Health Organization. Shamila Pullen has the details.
The World Health Organization, in a new special report released on Monday, says governments and policymakers must act with urgency on the climate and health crisis. The report describes climate change as the single biggest health threat facing humanity. The report also outlined 10 recommended climate and health actions, along with the research in support of why each action is beneficial.
Healthcare professionals have said to me, if you think COVID is bad, when it comes to climate change, you ain't seen nothing yet. It's the grandmother of all health threats. COVID and climate change are compounding each other, and they're adding pressures on already weak health systems and staff. And it's why business as usual is not an option.
Groups representing 45 million nurses, doctors and health professionals around the world have now signed an open letter to heads of state and national delegations urging action on the climate crisis.
We know that climate change is affecting our health. That has been clearly demonstrated. Dear maybe later can elaborate a little bit more on that. But we know very well that climate change is affecting the pillars of our health: food, water, the quality of the air, and shelter. So as you can imagine, all of that will represent a major risk for our health. And therefore, we need to invest on adaptation to climate change, on more resilient healthcare facilities.
And despite the fact that this initiative is going to be costly, the WHO says the health gains will in the end save money.
IMF recently came out with a report that estimated that we are currently, as the globe, financing the fossil fuel industry to the tune of about $5.9 trillion a year. That's about $11 million a minute. And about half of that is the unpaid health costs of air pollution and so on.
Shamila Pullen, TVJ News.
72 new cases of COVID-19 are reported on Monday from 521 test samples. The country's overall case count stands at 86,456. The positivity rate is 13.2%. 391 people are hospitalized with the respiratory illness. 31 patients are critically ill, while 52 are severely ill. 145 more people have recovered from the virus, pushing the overall recovery count to 54,569. There are 29,264 active cases. In the meantime, COVID-19 has claimed 9 more lives in Jamaica, increasing the death toll to 2,034. One death is under investigation. An investigation is underway into the attack on a policeman's house in Black River, St. Elizabeth last night by heavily armed gunmen. Reports are that the gunmen fired several shots at the house. The policeman's wife who was at the house escaped injuries. The incident happened about 10 o'clock. It's reported that the policeman's wife heard a knock on the door and looked through the window. The gunmen reportedly opened a gunfire at the house. The police were alerted, and on arrival, they saw several high-powered spent shell casings were found at the location. Now, our news center has been informed that the police who is assigned to the Westmoreland Division was recently involved in a fatal shooting with gunmen who were traveling in a stolen car. A woman escaped death after the vehicle she was driving in plunged over a precipice and landed on someone's kitchen. Reports are that the woman was driving along the Roses Valley Main Road in St. Elizabeth, which was wet. She lost control of the Toyota Ace minibus she was driving.
Develop a skid. And every time we hear this kid in the shopman say, we better go call him back because he can't make it. You know, see. And when by the time he said that, when we listen, we hear boom, when we sit down and look at it, we clap picture about.
And it's now time for the Business Minute. Here's O'Shane Masters.
the International Air Transport Association, IATA, says airlines globally will lose $51.8 billion this year, with the losses persisting next year. However, losses in 2022 are forecast to drop to $11.6 billion. According to IATA, American carriers will enjoy much better results, with estimated 2022 profits of $9.9 billion, following projected losses of $5.5 billion this year. IATA projects that global passenger demand, measured by the number of miles flown by paying airline passengers, will end 2021 at 40% of the 2019 level, before rising to 61% of last year's total in 2022. And World Bank chief economist Carmen Reinhart says it's a long road ahead before developing states achieve sustained recovery from the pandemic.
We had exceptional declines in output and GDP almost across the board in 2020. So we're going to get a rebound. We are indeed seeing rebounds. Now, by recovery, what I really mean is that on a per capita basis, income per person is at least where it was before the pandemic. That'll take longer. So notwithstanding what we're seeing in rebounds, incomes per capita, especially for the low-income countries and the middle-income countries, that true recovery will take longer.
And that's it for the Business Minute. I'm Shane Masters.
Now for your regional and international stories, here's Sandy Williams.
In the region, the Barbados government has announced plans for the establishment of safe zones as the island continues to be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Prime Minister Mia Mottley, in a broadcast to the nation last night, said her administration has decided against further lockdowns and that it was now necessary to protect those who are taking the vaccine. The safe zones will have designated places for persons who are either vaccinated or recently tested for COVID-19. She said the creation of these safe zones will first target care workers in the first instance, followed by frontline workers, along with those in the tourism and education sectors. On the international scene, a new study from Climate Central, a non-profit research group, shows that roughly 50 major coastal cities will need to implement unprecedented adaptation measures to prevent rising seas from swallowing their most populated areas. The analysis, in collaboration with researchers at Princeton University and the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research in Germany, resulted in striking visual contrasts between the world as we know it today and our underwater future if the planet warms to 3 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Climate Central researchers used global evaluation and population data to analyze parts of the world that will be most vulnerable to sea level rise, which tend to be concentrated in the Asia-Pacific region. The report says small island nations at risk of near total loss of land and 8 of the top 10 areas exposed to sea level rise are in Asia, with approximately 600 million people exposed to inundation under a 3-degree warming scenario. And that's the top regional and international stories. I'm Sandy Williams.
And we now head to a quick break. When we come back, Renardo Brown will have the Midday Sports.
Welcome back to your Midday Sports. Now, Jamaica is set to make history at the inaugural Pan Am Junior Championships in December when they field a skateboarding team, the first time the country will be represented in the sport at this high level. As we'll hear in this report from Denise Walters, the hope of Jamaica Skateboarding Limited, this team will be the foundation that will lead to the qualification to the 2024 Olympic Games.
Jamaica has sent skateboarders to represent in street and park skate in Brazil and have made appearances in World Cup qualifiers. However, the team that will be in Cali, Colombia will be the first to represent Jamaica at a tournament.
Tournaments such as these are seen by the Skateboarding Jamaica Board as a beginning to the pathway to qualification to the 2024 Olympic Games. Before participating in the competition next month, our athlete will be sent to a training camp courtesy of the GOA and SJL to get much needed practice with some of the best young skateboarders in the world.
President of JSL Ryan Foster says this is a step in the right direction for the Jamaican skaters.
We have a core of skateboarders currently which will form part of our Olympic squad, and the board of SJL will be working with our strategic stakeholders to ensure that Jamaica will have representation in 2024 Olympics.
Meanwhile, JSL Vice President Steve Douglas says Jamaica will participate in only one discipline of skateboarding.
Jamaica will participate in the street discipline of skateboarding. I'm excited about this achievement. I know Jamaican skateboarder will impressively execute the competition.
Douglas adds that the grassroots program that the Jamaica Skateboard Federation implemented is bearing fruits.
The Jamaica Skateboard Federation grassroots programs are now focused on sustaining the communities with skateboards and certified instructors. Our network and sponsors are now in the next phase to provide safety gears, skateboarding shoes, and another 100 skateboards to distribute to the communities in Jamaica.
Skateboarding is among 39 sporting disciplines that will be contested at the inaugural Pan American Junior Games to be held between November 25 and December 5 in Cali, Colombia. Denise Walters for TVJ Sport.
It looks fun, doesn't it? Now, finally, Germany became the first European team to qualify for the 2022 World Cup by crushing North Macedonia 4-0 away on Monday to secure top spot in Group J with 2 games to spare. A second-half double by Timo Werner and 1 goal each from Kai Havertz and Jamal Musiala secured Germany's 5th win in their 5th game under new coach Hansi Flick and lifted them to 21 points with Romania in second on 13. All group winners in European qualification automatically secure a place at the tournament in Qatar. The Germans were eliminated in the first round of the 2018 World Cup and the last 16 at this year's Euros. And that's it for your midday sports report. Giovanni, it's back to you.
Thanks, Leonardo. Well, that must be fun. We look forward to the day when Jamaica will be qualifying, even if it's the last kick of the last game in the last minute, but we'll be grateful. Well, that's it indeed for the Midday News. I'm Giovanni Dennis. Join us at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, have a good afternoon.